So sorry.
1 second. All right, let's go. Okay, great. Welcome to the DRC meeting for 4405 East West Highway. My name is Christina Sorrento. I am the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and your lead reviewer today is Grace Bogdan. Why are you shaking your head at me?
Just for today, I am covering for Adam Bossi, who is the lead reviewer.
There we go. Thank you. So Grace is handling it today, but this is Adam's project. The purpose of this meeting is for the applicant to answer any or ask any questions you might have based on the comments you received. And this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. So I'll turn it over to Grace first to kind of highlight any of the major issues, and then really we'll turn it over to the applicant. So go ahead, Grace.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to start with the agency comments. From Fire Access, there were a couple comments regarding revisions to the plans. I think the most important is the 15-foot clearance access to be provided all around the building. As we know, this is sketch plan and there is no approval at this time, but this is an important comment that we do think could impact the massing of the building. And so you should be working with Maria at this time to follow up with that. In terms of DOT and streetscape comments, continue to coordinate with DOT and SHA to refine the cross-section for East-West Highway to be adaptable for an interim and ultimate design. And we suggest having a follow-up meeting with those agencies and planning staff as soon as possible. This doesn't need to get solved during the sketch plan process, but we do want this conversation to get started at this time. In terms of parks, we have a comment. The SOJ, and we've asked for this in our pre-submission meetings, the SOJ needs to address the neighborhood green, the sector planned neighborhood green. If it's not going to be provided on the site, the applicant does need to provide justification for it in the SOJ as to why. And also Parks is requesting a financial contribution for the future park. You can see those comments. And in terms of other transportation related comments, a parking waiver will be required at site plan because this is outside the PLD, and a transportation impact study at preliminary plan. Environmentally speaking, a noise analysis will be required at preliminary plan. And moving into design comments, the SOJ needs to get beefed up a bit in terms of compatibility justification, in terms of the existing and abutting properties. And then also in terms of architectural features, we will be looking for additional features at the time of site plan as this project moves forward. In particular, at the rear of the property, given the future neighborhood green, we're looking maybe for making sure that those elevations will have a nice relationship with the future park, perhaps a secondary entrance and other things of that nature. In terms of the green cover proposed, there is a significant green cover area proposed in the exhibit, and we're wondering for the area that's going to be above the parking structure, will be that viable for canopy trees, or what sort of landscaping were you looking to be having there? And if you have any precedents in terms of larger trees, we'd like to see those. And then lastly, with the public benefit point package, the way it's laid out right now, you're really close to your 100 points, and we know those points aren't guaranteed in terms of design excellence and other things. And so, you know, to avoid any issues moving forward at site plan, we do suggest adding additional categories at this time. If you would be doing the financial contribution to parks, you might be able to consider major public facilities category for that, or you could do an additional PIP payment and receive public benefit points for that, or add other dwelling unit mix categories. And, you know, we do think that whatever you choose, we should have more categories than what you're proposing at this point. And so those are the major points, and I'll hand it over to you guys, and then we'll talk schedule after.
Thank you. Pat Harris with Lord Turley and Brewer, and with me are John Camera from Perseus, and then we have the VICA team, and I believe, and the architects from SKNI, and then our architects from VICA. So a lot of our comments deal with the frontage, so I'm going to hold those for a second, and then also we want to talk about the park. But there were a handful of minor things that I just wanted to acknowledge or make comment on. First, we just received a comment from DOT about needing to submit a level 3 TDM plan, because this is, this is only sketch. I mean, we are prepared to do that, but at preliminary, but not at sketch. I don't think there's a requirement at sketch to do that. Grace, you mentioned the parking waiver, and yes, we're still evaluating that just because we're not sure at this time what that ground floor non-residential, what those non-residential uses are going to be. So at site plan and preliminary plan, we will be further evaluating the parking and the need for a waiver. Then in terms of the green cover, I think there may need to be clarification on that. I mean, we're providing the 35% over structure on the roof, but then also, we have that parking garage that extends to the property lines. But there was a comment, and maybe that wasn't clear from our plans, but with that, if there's still a concern about the 35%, maybe we should discuss that, because we didn't think we had any problems with that.
I don't think the issue is that the 35% is being met or not. I think we're just wondering what that's going to look like, because, I mean, if it's going to be over structure, we want to know, are there going to be trees? Are you preparing to construct it in a way where it could support something other than just vegetation? And so I think it's more like a curiosity question or something to keep in mind at this point.
Okay. Trini, did you have any comment on that, or are you good with that guidance or comment?
Pat, I don't see Trini. This is Chris, but I think it's something we were considering, Grace, looking at. We have some substantial grading, say on the east side, so we may be able to accommodate some area, but it's something we just have to further study during site plan.
Okay.
And then there was a comment about no transformers in the right of way. The right of way is an SHA right of way, and based on our experience up and down SHA roads, that SHA does allow, in certain instances, the transformers in the right of way. So, I'm sorry, what?
No, go ahead, Pat.
Oh, so it's our intent. I mean, we'll work with SHA on that, but our intent was to locate them, given the configuration of the site. Our intent was to locate them in the right of way, but close up to the building, as we've shown. Then moving to the frontage, and there's a number of frontage comments. One big one, which I know Park and Planning said, there was a question about the location of the access to the parking, which is on the west side of the building, and a comment about its proximity to the driveway, to the other driveway, which is further to the west. But Park and Planning said, but really we would defer to DOT on this. It wasn't a DOT comment, but obviously because that driveway location is important, if it needs to be moved, we want to know that now. So it wasn't a DOT comment, but but we want to obtain confirmation that DOT is comfortable with the location of the driveway as we're showing it.
Yeah, given that was my comment, I'm happy to speak to it. Typically, DOT requests like a 3-foot offset from the property line. Given that this is an SHA right-of-way, we certainly defer to them. But we just want to make sure that that's sort of talked about at this stage, since, the earlier the better, because it could affect the overall design of your site. So just something we wanted to pick up on.
Okay, and we do realize, and we will work with you during site plan about how that driveway works.
Right.
The adjacent property is a little unusual, just because its entire frontage is almost a driveway.
Yeah, and I want to point out, I really appreciate that you were providing truck turning templates at this phase. That's really early and that's helpful. One of our comments was that it would be helpful to see how a passenger vehicle, if they didn't intend to get into the building, how they can, make that maneuver out of there, and whether they have access to the garage or if it's an arm. So some of that's also your operations of your building, which probably won't be, settled until site plan. But we just wanted to bring that up now so that there's no surprises, and it'll make it an easier review when you submit at that time.
That's fine, and we discussed that, and we can show you how that would be accommodated.
Pat, this is Paul Mortensen. I
Yes.
have just a question, maybe
Certainly.
just for your designers. Have you guys looked at the possibility of building your building all the way to the property line to the west, and therefore putting the driveway and everything internal to your building? I mean, it seems to me that a party wall on your western edge might be a very good thing here, especially because the master plan calls for some unique features along east-west, almost at this location, but basically at the corner. And that might allow the building that is probably going to go into the corner to basically have a zero lot line party wall against your building, and therefore create a consistent street wall rather than small detached buildings all the way down east-west. I just think it might be a much better environment and scheme along the street, and I just wondering if you guys have thought about that.
Hey, Paul, it's Chris from SK&I. I think we considered it very early on, but because of the length and distance of the site, we're using that driveway as part of our fire access, allowing at least 150 feet in for Marie to back in her trucks in there to have that. So we would have to basically kind of cantilever over that, and then so we kind of found that to be kind of a more difficult solution, also just because of the uncertainty of what is actually going on at that corner, if it's a park, if it's a building. Because I know we've talked with you extensively about where we think that public space would be, and maybe it kind of makes sense to put it at this corner. And if it is, I mean, I don't think we'd want a solid wall there. I think it would be beneficial to have a very active frontage, especially when you're looking back from East-West Highway in Wisconsin, looking back towards these buildings. This would be kind of like a prime corner. So we wanted to allow enough room to have as much articulation and windows as possible, really, at the end of the day, and gives us as much flexibility.
Have you guys, I mean, I know that the two properties at the corner have, I believe they've submitted a little proposal. Have you spoken with them yet about their project?
That's news to me. I don't think anyone else on our team is aware of that either, actually. That's interesting to hear. When you say they've submitted a little proposal, just a concept afloat with.
Well, I believe about 2 weeks ago we did receive something. I don't know if the team has more information on that, but there was a proposal for a building on that corner.
No, I mean, I'll clarify. We don't have a concept plan or anything like that in. If it happened, it might have been a meeting that I'm not aware of, but I don't think we have any actual applications in for that corner.
There's no applications, and we do have a meeting set up, though.
Okay.
Interest. Okay. Well, we may reach out to them, and just so there could be some level of coordination, obviously. And actually, I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Chris. Wouldn't the fire access issue sort of preclude us from building a party wall to the western edge of the site? Just that issue alone.
This is since I'm here. My understanding is you have no access to the rear of this building. All of the access is coming from East-West Highway. So if that's the case, your 450 feet would have to now come all the way around the back of the building and to the back of that party wall, which is obviously not the way this is laid out.
Yeah, so I think we would have to significantly change the plan to try to make that accessible.
Okay. The next thing having to do with the placement of the building, it had to do with the comment or the frontage, I should say. The issue of SHA, Maryland DOT, and County DOT evaluating the potential, in park and planning, the potential of two-way east-west highway. That comment scared us a bit, I'll be honest, just because that could end up in a very protracted discussion, which hopefully we don't get drawn into and delayed by. When we met early on about the east-west right-of-way section, it was intended, we want to do what we can to provide you what you need, but we don't want to get delayed by those discussions. So Grace, did you suggest that we have another meeting to discuss East-West Highway?
I think, yeah.
Do you want me to jump in? I'm sorry,
Sure.
I know it was directed to you. I'm the source of the problem, so I'm happy to jump in. So this is a recent development since when you first started. So this was news to us, but we want to make sure that what we're doing on this site doesn't preclude what they're studying. And so, yeah, I think having a meeting, because we've got a couple of things. I mean, this is a lot of moving parts, but I think we're really excited about how this could really take shape and set the tone for the rest of the street. So we want to first explore what are the possible needs of a two-way, or if there's a lane diet or other things that are being explored, make sure we don't preclude that so that we don't need to come back to this. And then the other thing we need to figure out is transitioning the shared use path, which is going to be the interim condition, I believe, to the potential separated bikeway. And so we just want to make sure that all of this works with your site and that it's going to be minimally impacted for when MCDOT/if SHA makes any changes on this road can all be done with as little pain and change as possible. So we just want to make sure that we're being thoughtful. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, and I think what you said is, I mean, we agree. We don't want to do anything to preclude that. But we
Right.
also don't want to get caught up in a protracted
Well, and
discussion.
we certainly
But
don't want to
let's
delay the
meet,
project either, yeah.
I think we should meet again. The other thing is, and it's interesting that the corner piece is coming in, because the other question is about the transitioning of the bike path if they don't develop, if that corner piece doesn't go forward. So I think we need to discuss that as well.
Pat, this is Atul. One thing I did want to add to this, because it's related, is the transformers. Because if they're underground, it's one thing. If they're not underground, then they kind of become problematic. We've had this discussion on pretty much every project in urban areas. We'll have to work with you to make sure that whatever is being proposed is not undermining the streetscape in the interim or the permanent condition.
Really good point.
Got it. We will likely be widening and looking at our turning radiuses, the driveway entrance. It's currently 20 feet. I think it needs to be 24 feet. And that was a comment that was brought up. And then the other final comment regarding the frontage, somewhat related to the frontage, has to do with loading and Uber pickup and how that's accommodated. And early on, we heard from you, no, there's not to be, at least under the one-way scenario of East West Highway, there's not to be a pickup area along the frontage of the building. So we need to have a little bit more discussion on how that would be accommodated on the driveway, on the western side of the building.
Agreed. That's why we really appreciate having the sketch plan by itself. This is really helpful to have those discussions.
Okay, anything before we move on to the park? I wanted to ask our team, is there anything else on the items that we've covered thus far? I take that as a no. Okay. And then finally, the open space. So, when we looked, and this was another thing that we focused on early on in the process. When we look at the master plan, it says two things. First of all, it says potential open space, location to be determined. And then it says consider new and formal open space. So the recommendations for open space in this area are somewhat different than what you see in other areas of the master plan, where it was essentially a mandate, there shall be open space in this area. And when we were meeting previously, I think it was acknowledged that this site itself doesn't lend itself to open space. And it sounds like everyone continues to be in agreement with that. It's not clear where the open space wants to be or would be. And so the one comment about designing your building so that it accommodates the open space, no one knows where that if in fact there will be open space, and that's a question mark, where it will be. So it's a little bit hard to design to something that has not yet been determined that, one, it's going to exist, and two, if it is going to exist, where it's going to be located. The other thing is, I think there was a comment about our project taking up a third of that open space, but the recommendation, if in fact there is going to be open space, was that it would only be a third of an acre. And our site's over an acre. So, I mean, our impact on whatever open space there may be there is fairly minimal. And again, it was an asterisk covering several properties. So And then the final thing I would say is during our last meeting, I thought, and I may have misunderstood this, we had made the point that this project's going to be paying X amount of dollars for the PIP, and I can't remember how much it was. And I thought someone said that PIP money cannot be used. It's not intended to acquire open space. But in fact, I thought in looking through the county's budget information, it looks like that's exactly what it's supposed to be intended for. So I'm not clear why, the concept of making a contribution when we are already paying a significant PIP number, what the justification for that is. So we may need to have further discussion with, I don't know if Henry's on the call, but with planning and with parks on that one.
Sure. Hey, Pat, this is Henry. I'm here. I can
Hi,
give a couple of quick. So just we were the one on the third, trying to remember to hit everything on the third of the area, and that's looking at the sector plan recommendation under I think it's page 84, and it says Bethesda Chevy Chase East Neighborhood Green, which is the third of the acre neighborhood green spot, and it's pretty specific that needs to be in this area in between East West Highway, Pearl Street, and the high school. And this site takes up a third of the on-the-ground square footage in that area. And so while we agree, like you said, we're not, that putting that public space, that neighborhood green on this site doesn't really work, but concerned about filling up this entire space without thinking about that park, which we do feel the master plan is pretty clear needs to be here somewhere. And so that's where we're looking for that other contribution towards that future park. And as Grace mentioned, looking at that as a way to make that work where there's additional public benefit points for you guys, seems like it's a pretty reasonable thing to get to at some point.
When you say the master plan is pretty clear that the park needs to be here, unlike other, and in fact, I'll admit that in my experience, I mean, most of the times I have a designation, I know, there's an obligation for a park. In two different places in the master plan, it says potential open space and consider new and formal open space. So it's not, again, like I said at the opening, I don't think there was a mandate that there shall be a park in this location.
I mean, I think we can all agree that the sector plan has been a little difficult to read for this site in terms of that open space, but at the same time, it does say that an open space needs to be in this vicinity. And so what Parks is saying is, like, we understand it shouldn't be on the site, even though that justification needs to be added to the SOJ. But the financial contribution is what they're looking for in terms of helping make that park a reality. And like we said, you could receive public benefit points to get to your end need there. So.
Okay, well, we need to discuss this more internally, and then we'll reach out when we're going to have a follow-up meeting, obviously, on a number of things. But we'll make sure that Henry and planning, park and planning, are both in that meeting to discuss what that looks like.
Sounds good. Thanks.
And then I think that may be it, but I want to again ask our team if there's anything else that we need clarification on before we talk about the schedule. James or
nothing
John?
with that. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, schedule.
So I think in your acceptance letter, it might have given you the wrong planning board date, but the planning board hearing would be set for November 3rd. And so backtracking from that, your first resubmittal will be due September 14th, with the last resubmittal September 19th. The crunch schedule will be the best. And agency letters due October 4th.
Grace, could you restate the final submittal? I thought I heard September 18th.
September 19th.
19th.
With sketch, we usually only receive one submittal, so that's why the last one is so close to the first, but
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Appreciate your time, and we will be back in touch.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Meeting for the Hillcrest property. And I am Christina Sorrento. I'm the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Your lead reviewer is Alex Dupree. And thank you for bringing up the plan, Alex. This meeting is really for you to ask any questions based upon the comments you received. And I'll ask Alex first to kind of highlight any of the major issues we should talk about, and then turn it over to you. So go ahead, Alex.
Great, nice to meet you all. So my name is Alex, I'm the lead reviewer. This application is on Hillcrest Ave in Olney. They're proposing a preliminary plan for the site. The zoning is CRT with a max FAR of 2. It's within the Patuxent River Primary Management Area. For a little bit of background about the site, they are proposing to deed the large forested upper portion to parks, which is about 56,000 square feet. And they are proposing to reforest and manage this area for invasive species for 5 years. And then the lower portion of the site, they would like to use as a site for a 2-story medical office building with a parking lot and improvements along Hillcrest Ave. And so we're hoping to hear more from the applicant on some of our comments around maintenance of the dedicated park area, perhaps FCP requirements, the pedestrian connection to the park that we are asking for, and the parking spaces and landscaping in the parking lot.
Great. Thank you very much for the intro. I'm Françoise Carrier, Land Use Counsel for the applicant. The applicant is a small family-owned company, and Lud Lescavar, who is the head of the company, is with us virtually. And we also have our
Hi, everybody.
Engineers. There's Lud. Hi. Our engineers are with us. Brandon, suddenly your last name escapes me.
Fritz.
Brandon Fritz. I'm Kayla Mosbeck from Kim Engineering, and Shariar Itamati is our traffic consultant. So I'll address the questions that Alex identified. As to environmental, I think we need to keep working a little bit on the best way to present the forest conservation plan, but we're certainly in agreement with the substance of it. What has to happen within the Stream Valley area in terms of removing non-native invasives and doing afforestation. And I know that there's going to be coordination between parks and planning on exactly how that happens. So, that we'll do that at the appropriate time. So I don't think we need to discuss that too much today. We have some work to do on our own. I'll come back to you on that. There was one comment about the trying to do more plantings inside on a part of the property that has an existing storm drain easement. That's an easement that's held by the neighboring property. So we don't have the ability to plant within it. So that's why you saw that kind of gap in the planting. Our biggest issue really has to do with parks. When we came through on concept plan, the Parks Department had their comment was that we could do two things. Either we could create the seating area and maintain it, or we could not create the seating area. The applicant is not willing to do perpetual maintenance on that seating area. It's just not feasible. It's just too big a burden for a small company and a small building to take on. So that literally will be a deal breaker if that's something that, if parks can't accept it without that, then I'm not sure what happens to the project, because it's just too much. This family they own a few small properties, and they really want to contribute something nice for Olney. They like the area. They thought a little office building would be a good addition. And unfortunately, the one that there's sort of a market for is medical office, and it requires a lot of parking. So Lud has gone through a lot of trouble to be able to get land for the parking by buying this whole big Stream Valley property in order to get a tiny little corner that gives a few more parking spaces and place for a dumpster, a little more stormwater management area. But it's complicated, with the whole thing we're trying to do. So I hope that Parks and Planning can work with us to be able to accept this without the applicant having to maintain that. LUD is willing to maintain it for the 5-year period of the maintenance period, while he's also doing the invasive species upkeep and so forth. But that would be the limit of what we can offer. And I guess I'll just also add that the seating area issue was one of the main reasons that we did a concept plan. So it's very surprising to us, to put it mildly, that Parks seems to be changing your mind. Because usually concept plan, if you specifically discuss something, the applicant relies on that. So that's where we are on that issue. Do you have any thoughts on that now, Henry? Or
I mean, it sounds like continuing to discuss it a little bit. I'm not the person to make the call on stuff, but I will say that, and I apologize because I wasn't in the concept round of stuff, but the understanding that I had, and I think one of the reasons that we were moving with looking to see it was there was a meeting, I think March 16th or 17th. And my understanding from the outcome on that was that everybody had kind of agreed on there being the seating area with maintenance from the applicant. And that was the direction that everybody wanted to go in. So then we had been surprised when it was not included at this point. And we had kind of wanted to stick with what we felt like was the last agreement that we had in discussions. So we were looking to go to that and keep it forward.
Yeah, at that meeting, I think that my client did not absorb the in perpetuity part. And when he said that he could maintain it, he was figuring for a limited period of time. And it was later that day or the next day that I used the words in perpetuity. And he's like, what? Really? I can't do that. So it was just an honest mistake. And I did communicate it. Maybe it was just to Sandra. Maybe it didn't go to the whole.
When we've had enough staff turnover stuff that it could have. It could definitely have gotten lost in the shuffle with people.
That's what I figured. Okay. So I hope you can go back and rethink that.
Francoise, and just for us to understand, the main concern with maintenance, at least from Parks I recall, was the trash removal, which needs to happen sort of regularly.
Right.
Was that also your main concern with maintaining it in perpetuity, or were you concerned with other aspects of the?
I guess I might ask Lud to comment on that. Lud, how do you feel about maintenance if it doesn't involve the trash removal? And if you don't feel like you want to answer that now, that's okay too. We can talk about it.
Hi. Well, it's sort of the whole project, the whole corner. It's so far away from our project, we would have to drive around Georgia Avenue to get to it and pay somebody to do that. It's really the holistic idea of this whole rear parcel, and we really wanted to convey this. And then there quite a few strings became attached to it, and that's where it gets difficult to sort of tease out what we need to do to make this happen, and at the same time maintain some profitability.
No, I definitely understand that, and I respect that. The thought, this sort of came up because the public open space could not fit on site. So we said, okay, let's meet the requirement at the corner off site against Georgia Avenue, which seems to have good visibility and good access from Georgia. But that was sort of the inherent thought. And if the public open space would be provided on site, you would have to maintain it as part of your development, as part of your tenants, obligations. So it seemed like this would be a reasonable request with the added flexibility that now you can have it in, off-site in a different location and maximize the use of your property for parking and for the building and for the other requirements that you have. So we felt that from our perspective, we were being flexible, and we were hoping that you could also maybe look at some options to accommodate the request from Parks to maintain it. The trash seemed to be the most sort of pertinent issue that Parks really needed help with. And we thought that with the path connections that we were providing, that we could perhaps just roll the bins along the sidewalk and just access that fairly easily. So we were thinking that we were trying to, make a win-win situation here for everybody, for you to maximize the use of your site and for Parks also to get some help with the trash removal.
Yeah. I think that, I appreciate your reasonable response to this little bit of a problem. And we would be happy to talk about, a strategy again to make this happen. We want to make the project happen. And I just hope that both parties will work together to do that. And so I think just in summary, we can kind of re-huddle here and see if we can kind of come up with maybe a proposal to you that would be a benefit to both of us.
I'm trying to hear real quick. It's Ryan Sigworth. I was for better or worse the architect of this offsite public open space idea. I did want to point out in the zoning ordinance, so this isn't anything, Parks has, since this will be a dedication, Parks and Act to a lot of different things or not agree. But from a raw zoning ordinance requirement for offsite options of public open space, I just want to point out in the subpart 2, so that C2, it says paying for all or part of the cost to design, construct, renovate, restore, install, or operate a public open space located within or near an applicable master plan area. Doesn't say and, it says or operate. So there's some flexibility there to design, construct, renovate, restore, install, or operate. And it does go back in the subpart A here that says equals the cost of constructing the same amount of public open space and any associated amenity on site per square foot plus the fair market value of the land per square foot. So from a zoning standpoint, I don't think it requires operate.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate that. And,
that's just focused on the zoning part, not necessarily.
Right. And from a cost perspective, obviously it's much more costly for Ludd to have purchased this property and to be doing all the non-natives and moot removal and the afforestation and even build that area. I mean, that's much more costly than it would be to have carved out a little space on his site. He would have less parking, but the maintenance would be just part of the normal upkeep of an office site. And, it would be a bench and, some shrubs. Because that's what you could put on an office site like this. So this is better for everybody if we can find a way to make it work. I lost my notes because my computer went dark. It's also kind of new to be requesting a paved connection. We talked about a natural surface trail, and then Park said, no, we don't want a trail. Yes, we do. No, we don't. And now it's paved. So how did that evolve?
I can mention that a little bit. So in terms of looking at natural surface trails and down by the creek and things like that, our staff has kind of evaluated that and doesn't think that's a great idea. Suggesting this paved connection across the southern end of the parcel that we're talking about having become parkland is thinking about how to make that seating area both functional and accessible and really a sort of usable piece of the park, but also about how to address those maintenance concerns and make it easy. That's about, I think, 250, 270 feet kind of across there. And if that was sort of a paved trail sidewalk thing, it seems like it would be an easier connection for whoever's doing the grounds maintenance on site to be able to just have that couple 100 feet, the few benches that are at the seating area, as part of the loop that they're doing when they're doing the sort of general grounds maintenance, which is the piece that we really need help with to make this work. Like sort of long-term structural maintenance things. I'm fairly confident Parks since we can handle it's that sort of day-to-day, making sure that day-to-day, that kind of regular, keeping it nice and usable and desirable to, like you said, to make this be a benefit for the whole area and a nice improvement in this part only. And so we had mostly suggested that as a way to sort of try and help move towards finding a solution that works for everybody in a way to maintain it.
Okay, I appreciate the explanation.
So that might be part of, like,
Yeah,
that piece might be part of that kind of, sounds like we need to continue that conversation
Okay.
overall about how
Yeah,
to make that work.
I think we do, and it's good to have that information to mull over with everything else. And I guess the request for a public access easement across the development site, that's all part of the
Yeah, that's just
access idea?
Yeah, that's just ensuring that, given that we're talking about putting a connection in from, pointing at it kind of to the north end of the parking lot here where it's going to come around. But that's sort of just a fail-safe that we tend to request that makes it obvious that the public could walk across the parking lot to use the connection on Parkland.
Yeah, I think the public can walk across the parking lot because it's an office building and it's not a, there are not going to be any no trespassing signs. And,
in order for it to seem more accessible, it helps to have that. I mean, a lot of people would look at a parking lot of an office building and not really know that there's continued access beyond the parking lot.
Well, and I guess we need to think that through a little bit. Are you going to be asking for signage to say, hey, you can get to the park this way? Are you going to be asking for lighting that would be in excess of what would normally be provided? Obviously, the parking lot will be lit because in the wintertime it will be dark and people are still using it. But, are there going to be additional enhanced expectations for ways to make that, whatever you guys, whatever your vision is here for connecting people. I think most people who use the little seating area would do it from Georgia Avenue. Even if you were over here and you wanted to get there, it'd be much easier to walk on the sidewalk than to go behind some buildings, in between buildings and a forest. A lot of people aren't going to feel safe. And I really hope you're not going to ask the applicant to light that path along the
That's not currently
southern part, because that's a big expense.
to be honest, that's the first time anybody said lighting the path. So
I know how paths go.
Yeah.
I mean, part of this consideration is you're having a use that's going to have a lot of daytime office workers there.
Yes.
And they're going to have lunch breaks. They're going to have in between spaces where maybe they would want to experience a green space. And so making that more accessible for the people that are actually inhabiting that space, to me, is a benefit also for you guys. To make it more worthwhile and marketable in some ways.
I guess, again, I question the need for it because it's not hard to walk down the sidewalk to Georgia Avenue and around the corner. The distances are small.
It seems to be making a pedestrian do more work than they really should have to, especially since Georgia Ave isn't always the most friendly for pedestrians to have to walk along. It's a pretty busy road. And so if they're able to just access the space through like a beautiful forested area, to me, that's very appealing.
I hear you. I guess from my perspective, I'm thinking about a project that is on the edge financially, and each additional item, while each one might not be that big, you add them up, they are meaningful.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Are we talking about the paved path from the plaza area that's running behind the development site? Or are we talking about a path from another path?
We're going to talk about that one soon.
Okay.
Maybe.
This was the one along the south, like along the edge, which is actually in the Stream Valley buffer. So that's another question. I mean, normally a private party can't put pavement in the Stream Valley buffer. Maybe Parks is allowed to. But certainly, there would need to be some kind of special something to let us do that.
Yeah, I don't know what the exact technical details of it are, other than we did check with our natural resources staff who would need to look at that, and they said that it was okay with them given the settings, and that they'd be able to help figure out.
I'm seeing some skeptical faces on your side of the table. So we'll need to get more input on that issue.
Okay.
It is on the edge. So maybe that makes a difference, but I know the way the rules are written. So that will be another issue with the path. And then there's one other thing before I leave Parks. One of the comments is to carve out the stormwater management area rather than giving us an easement, having us not convey that piece. And that just seems really impractical. It's people often have stormwater outfalls in parkland. I mean, it happens, and the Parks Department gives easements so that they can maintain it. To make the applicant maintain ownership of this tiny little piece of land that's not part of the lot, that's just like this little tiny sliver.
Yeah, and I mean,
really
and our take is that it's much less cumbersome than us needing to give a separate easement back instead of just keeping it out of the conveyance.
Well, we shall have to discuss that too. I guess cumbersome is in the eye of the beholder.
Certainly.
There was also a request to shorten the stormwater pipe, and I think Brandon can explain to you that's not actually possible.
Yeah, they go out that far because we have to daylight those facilities.
Okay.
So based on the elevations, that's how far they have to go out so that the water can come out.
Okay, so we can. I would need you to explain that to our specific folks who work on
I think I've dealt with these on the 10 Mile Creek, some recent project, and with parks staff. So I don't want to speak for them, but I'm just going to maybe shed light that may or may not be accurate. But I think what they were asking for was to daylight it farther up, but then create like a step pool that would provide the safe conveyance down.
So those facilities are, like 4 or 5 feet deep.
Okay.
So if you run a pipe out from that elevation, you can't daylight further up the hill.
Okay. Yes, parks engineers.
Okay. There you go.
We'll let the engineers talk to engineers. So the transportation comments, the main one that is difficult for us is the idea of having a path between the building and the property line. I don't know if you guys can easily pull up that drawing, but we just think it's not a safe place to put a public path. There's a 10-foot space between the building and the fence because we had to move the building in order for fire and rescue to have access in case of emergency. And then behind the building, there's a stormwater management facility. So I don't know what we would do with that stormwater management facility. And, more fundamentally, the applicant doesn't want to create a situation where they're inviting the public into this 10-foot wide alley between a building and a fence, where somebody walking from the street is going to walk up to the end of an office building where someone with bad intentions could so easily just be hanging out behind the building, waiting for somebody to emerge from that space. And then they're in this, this place that is concealed from the street. And it just does not seem like a good place to invite the public. So the applicant really, really is not interested in putting in that, making that something that would have to be then lit and have, liability concerns associated with it.
And this is Chris Van Alstyne for the record, transportation planner. So the idea here is we really want to have clear street presence connecting public to public space. So the street being the public access, the park being public space. So we want to make sure that connection is clear to members of the public. So that doesn't necessarily have to be there, but that seems to be the clearest place to do that as opposed to walking through a parking lot. So once you go through a parking lot, it really loses the sense of clear public access. Maybe there's a way to reconfigure the parking lot. But what we really want is a clear street presence. Maybe we can discuss with parks, signage, things like that, other opportunities. And again, a lot of it's going to be depending on where we tie that into that rear connection through the properties. But at the end of the day, we could be open to alternative designs and placement, but what we really want is clear street presence.
Yeah. I just want to add to that. I think we looked at the project together, and that's an important point. The location that you talked about, Francois, definitely has some challenges. So it doesn't have to be in that location, but we cannot rely on the parking lot as being a pedestrian facility. Parking lots are for cars, and keep cars in there. We want to have adequate and safe and efficient public facilities for the pedestrians to move from the street to the back of the site, which is a publicly accessible amenity. I think there's some opportunities here quite frankly, to look at the site plan and tweak some things. For example, we already have a sidewalk on the north as up to the east side. That could very easily go further north through those two islands and make a connection back in a way that is not, overly complicated or duplicative, but works with what we're proposing. And that would also rely on the lighting in the parking lot. And so we are open to exploring those things and figuring out something that works. But we want to make sure that parking lot is not being considered as a pedestrian infrastructure.
Well, I appreciate all of that. I guess that I'm gonna repeat myself that each of these additional requirements makes it less likely that that's going to be a park. It's just a question. It's just a practical question. There's only so much that this small project under this ownership can bear. If this were a big company and they had, 40 different properties, maybe they spread that cost out in a different way. But that's not the case. So as we go forward discussing this, I really hope you all can bear in mind that we literally need some flexibility in order for this to happen. Otherwise, I won't give otherwise, but I'm like putting sidewalks through those two islands means we might not be able to fit trees there. And we neglected to put the trees in parking lot drawings, which we will rectify. But I feel I'm not sure I'm not sure whether it works.
So I believe from our standpoint, we are really trying to offer flexibility.
I know
to
you are. I hear
and
that.
especially from what Atul is saying, to me, that seems like a relatively minor change, given that you're already going to be putting pavement in that area. So we're really trying to offer this flexibility for you. We would also like to see wonderful landscaping. We don't want to get in a detrimental position with that. However, we are being very amenable in the fact that you don't have open space on this property. We're offering an alternative for that offsite. We're also offering you an alternative to having to make improvements on Georgia Ave with the property that you do own. And so through some of the flexibility that we're offering, we hope that we can make this really great site for a medical office building and that you can have plenty of parking and the space that you require.
I appreciate that. Would love to know more about the thoughts on signage, because that's going to be something the applicant has to think about. And it sounds like everybody wants to have some kind of signage if it's going to be, making it obvious to people. So we need to know what that looks like, how it works with the signage for the building. Sharyar, can you talk for just a minute about the on-street parking and the site distance issue?
Oh, on-street parking. The area is about 8 feet wide, will be preserved for future bicycle lane that we're gonna have on Hillcrest Avenue. We don't know when it's going to be a bike lane, so we thought that we are going to have on-street parking there. I think 3 spaces there, so I think there was a comment about the sight distance coming out of there. I think we have the sight distance, and basically we're saying that we're going to keep those 3 parking spaces along the frontage. So.
Wasn't there the site distance issue? Was that, I don't know if that was Brad or Chris's comment, I guess it was yours, Brad. Was that the site distance from the driveway? Or what site distance were you concerned about? Because I know the engineers tried to measure that off so that it would meet the standards and not impede site distance.
So like right on the corner, right by the driveway.
I'm sorry, would you show, are you talking about this parking lot here next to our
right
side?
where that bump out is toward the front side of the building?
I think you're talking about here, right?
Yeah, that area.
Okay, so the site distance either is from the driveway or from the parking lot, adjacent parking lot. I think the code says that you have to be 35 feet away from the intersection of a public road connecting at that location. First of all, this is not a public road. This is a parking adjacent to us. And then our driveway is not really a public road. And then we have measured the distance, site distance, and it works. Now, I don't really understand what is the concern about the site distance when we do have it.
So I think there's two things. So number one, the biggest issue is what we want is in place the final curb placement for the final facility, and that would include separated bike lanes. This is a higher class facility than what we typically see as an on-street bike lanes. This would be separated by some kind of physical buffer from the street edge. In this case, it would be street trees. So what we've done, and this is in conjunction.
You're talking about the future bike lane, right?
The future bike lane. In conjunction with DOT, we've determined where the final curb space would be based on the placement of the building frontage. So working back from there, we've come up with a street section that would include adequate space, 8-foot wide space for the future bike lane. So we provided that, put where the future curb would be, which as it stands is pretty close to where the existing, if there were a curb, where the existing line would be. As for the parking, it doesn't work with that long-term plan. You would have to end up ripping up pavement as far as we can tell, which is not something, we don't want to put down extra pavements if we have to rip it back up again. So that's one issue. Number two, in terms of pavement, we don't want the extra pavement down at this point. But this is the Patuxent watershed, so we do have guidance to reduce impervious surface. So that's another reason. On top of that, the site distance issue is coming from DOT, where it looks like you can only fit in one parking space if you were to move forward the parking space, which we just don't think having that much pavement takes us very far.
Okay.
So the long-term vision doesn't have a parking space. The long-term vision wouldn't have that area be paved. We have the curb line where we want it, less impervious surface up front. So hopefully, DOT, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, this is Brenda with DOT. We were also concerned with the existing parking that was not shown on the drawings you provided for the site distance on Hillcrest Avenue. And yeah, we agree with what Chris said in terms of the ultimate location for the curb.
Okay, are you asking us to show the line of sight distance? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was shown, but you didn't show the actual parking that's
oh, okay.
You mean the
on
parking
the side of on Hillcrest Avenue.
In front of the building.
Well,
okay.
We can certainly show that. I guess maybe it's my ignorance as a non-transportation engineer, but I thought that the future bike lane was supposed to go in the place where we're showing parking, so that pavement would be pavement in the long term.
In the future, so where you're currently showing the parking, that would be tree buffer.
No, actually, I'm sorry. I think we have the sidewalk, we have the buffer area, and then the pavement area that would be a parking spaces are the future bike lane area. The area that we are showing for parking is the future bike lane area. The bike lane that is planned is coming from Georgia Avenue, coming through here and going through the shopping center where we have two shopping buildings center that this is going to go through it is only 24 feet wide. So I don't know how the future bike lane is going to go through an area between two buildings that has a space only 24 feet wide. And then there is absolutely no funding, no design, no nothing for this future bike lane that goes through the shopping center. And probably it's going to be a long time before this is implemented, if ever, because of those buildings being in the way. So this is going to be a long-term bike lane, and why not use the parallel parking on a street parking until this bike lane is implemented, which is going to be a long-term. It just is a business street here. Actually, parking along the road is encouraged. So, I mean, I have all those reasons for having these parking spaces here versus that in the long-term future, we may have a bike lane here and we don't want to take the pavement out. Of course, we can take the pavement out. There's no.
Yeah, and definitely.
That's not an option.
This is DOT again, sorry. The site distance has to meet both interim and final conditions.
Correct.
And it currently does not meet the interim condition.
I guess it sounds like we need a little more information to better understand why you feel the site distance isn't met, because that's not obvious to us, and also to understand exactly what. Clearly, we had a different understanding than staff does about the long term. We thought that it was sidewalk, buffer, bike path, and it sounds like you're saying it's sidewalk, bike path, buffer. So can we get?
Yeah, and we can share. We do have a cross section we can share with you.
Okay.
But the long-term vision is in fact sidewalk, 2-foot wide buffer, 6-foot wide bike path, then street tree buffer, then road surface.
Correct.
So currently, as you can see on here, where the parking spaces is, that would be the tree panel. So that's the long-term version, is to have a tree panel. So we don't want to be in a position where we have to remove pavement.
All right. Well, this is something that we'll.
And again, I know we have questions on the site distance, but our position is we simply don't want the parking, because that we don't have to rip it up. We don't want the intermediate short-term impervious surface. Again, it's only one parking space.
I also see Christina trying to tell us it's time to move on.
Yes, we do. We need to wrap up because our next item starts soon.
We have one other question we can ask later of Brett, which is to understand where the curb ramp you're asking for. We need to understand exactly where it is, but we can do that offline. We will add the bicycle parking that should have been shown, and we will submit a landscape plan showing the parking lot trees and shading, which, both of those should have been shown, and they will be.
So we would also like to see you recalculate your parking. The handicap spots need to be included in the calculation.
We did include them, and the zoning code says that you can have more than your maximum if it's open to the public. So we were asking for that accommodation.
Okay, that wasn't made clear in the application.
I thought it was in the SOJ, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't spell it out as clearly as I should have. We did talk about that at concept plan. So I thought it was clear we were asking for that accommodation.
So is your parking calculation based on the market comps or something that you can share with us? You are asking for more than this.
Yeah, I'm not sure there were formal market comps. I think it's more the sense of the market from the applicant and the applicant's real estate advisor.
So we have, where this comment is coming from for having less parking is in our reviews of similar projects and similar medical office buildings. In fact, even projects that are OPDs and things like that, where people not only come and visit the doctor, some people park there, get a procedure, park all day. The ratios we have seen have been between 3.1, 3.3, 3.3. This is beyond 4. So we want to understand the rationale for.
Yeah. And is that true in completely suburban locations like this?
You're not talking about things that don't apply.
All right. Well, I can't answer that, and I don't think we have time to let the applicant do that right now. But we're certainly happy to give you some more information about that.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
This is the DRC meeting for HBKY at Ethiopian Orthodox Church. I am Christina Sorrento. Hang on one second. Okay, I'm Christina Sorrento. I'm the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. And your lead reviewer is Ryan Sigworth. He is bringing up the plan right now. The purpose of this meeting is for the applicant to ask any questions you might have based upon the comments that you received on Friday. And I will ask Ryan to highlight any of the major issues first and then turn it over to the applicant. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. As soon as Ryan brings that up, we can get started.
There we go. Yep.
Thanks, everyone. I think the main, I think the main point of discussion is probably, I believe we uploaded a sketch into to the supporting drawings folder. Is that correct? Into the supporting drawings folder of a alternative site layout on this project that I think is worth discussing. Also, the use of the access easement that kind of wraps around this property. And I think the outlot at the top, the creation of the outlot at the top, and that's in the easement area that was released by that adjacent property owner. You're actually cutting access to the lot of that because they have rights to that easement too, which I realize they have access to Moncaster as well, but they may need access for fire protection later on. So they still have rights to that easement. So I don't think you can create an outlot out of it. Also, I think there's discussion that should be had about what the future plan is for the rear part of this property and making sure that future access is maintained to make future development easier. I think we also want frontage improvements and the decel lane that's shown. I'm not sure if that's an SHA request that you spoke to them earlier or what, but I don't know where that quite came from. But I'll just let you guys sort of start.
Yeah, well, this is Peter Safari from McMillan Metro. Your microphone was cutting out a little bit, at least on my end, but I think I captured where you want us to start. Talking about the driveway. So this has been a point of discussion for a little while, I think, and I'll give you my summary and then any other information I can fill in those gaps too. Right now, there is an existing driveway that is a private driveway. We looked back into title as far back as it frankly goes and determined that this private driveway conveyed with this property and possibly along with one other that was then severed out. But the other property released any claim that it might have over the driveway. So that leaves HBKY as the interest holder in the driveway. There's also an easement, as you pointed out, that goes over the driveway area intended to reserve as a point of access for one Buddhist who owns a few of the lots to the rear and then off to the side. The current physical improvement doesn't necessarily track the easement area, and it doesn't go all the way back to the length of the easement either. So there are not actual physical improvements allowing for the right-of-way easement that's described in the document. And with respect to one Buddhist other access, they do have access, as you pointed out, they have access from Moncaster Mill that stretches through a number of parcels that they own and reaches back to the rear. So I think that, the question about the proposed outlot, I think that can be resolved either by preserving the existing easement or some combination of these things by preserving the existing easement despite the creation of the outlot. I don't think creating the outlot disturbs the easement in any way. And like I said, there's not currently an improvement on there, but it's also not necessary as a point of law. It's not a necessary route of access because each of those parcels are already accessed by the current driveway or capable of being accessed by the current driveway and properties that are controlled by one Buddhist. So, the long story short is I think we have the research for it and we have a plan for it, but we can certainly give you more information if it didn't come through in my earlier memo.
Yeah, I guess I tend to agree with you on the easement part. This P810 here, I don't know where the property line might be right there, but that property is also listed in the easement. And I would hate to cut off access, knowing these properties as I do and their depth, the idea of fire access being necessary at some point, you never know. So I'd hate to see that, they have the rights to use the easement, and I don't want to see that cut off. I do see that Doris Powell relinquished rights to the easement, so I get that part. But you do have other upstream users.
Hey, Brian, this is Kevin. We realize that, and that easement's not going to go anywhere. It just seemed to make sense to create that outlot to probably convey to the Juan Buddhists because it makes more sense that they own that piece of it. But the easement is still going to be there.
Okay.
It's just having HBKY own that little finger up in there ultimately doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that's where we were thinking about that.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the sketch that Paul and Atul worked on?
Yeah, can you pull it up?
Yeah, you can pull it up too. It's in E-plans, but yes, I will.
No, I just thought you might have a little quicker access to it, but yeah, I can.
Yeah, I do. Just want to show you. Just give me 1 second.
I think Ryan is there.
Yeah, I'm a couple clicks away if the internet is gonna be good to me. Here we go. So let me zoom in. This just basically covers the front part that you're showing to be developed. And essentially, it keeps your existing buildings that you show, but it moves your new sanctuary up closer to the street and sort of consolidates the parking in a more cohesive manner. And it also makes fire access easier. And it may be less paving, actually.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate the plan. I know the church has certain reservations about having the building that far forward because their practices and their festivals do a lot of gathering in front of their building, and putting it that far up to the street, maybe if it was, I don't think they'd really envision it going any further than maybe the face of that existing house to give them enough room out there.
Kevin, this is Atul. I think that's holding the line of the existing house is fine, especially if there's going to be some sort of a gathering space in front of the church. I think the point we were trying to make is that we didn't want the church building to be separated from the street with just some, parking. So if you all need a little bit more space and it's going to be a ceremonial space in front of the church building, that's even better. So, and this plan, I believe, shows more parking than what you had shown in your drawings. So there's some room in the back to carve out there to get to the numbers that you're looking for.
And there is a gathering space in the white in the front. Whether or not that's big enough is another question, but the gathering space is kind of included in this drawing as well.
It's just the fact that it's right up on rather high-speed road was kind of the issue.
I understand. I just wanted to make the point that we didn't lose sight of that.
I understand. And I know the church has certain concerns about access and how everybody gets in and out of this site. So we need to study the sketch more and I think really better understand how the church views using all of this. But certainly there are some very positive points about this sketch.
I mean, I will note that the two back buildings that you're wanting to preserve, it creates a lot more direct and easier connection to those with the sort of access drive that goes right to them. So, I mean, it makes your site more efficient for sure.
Right. Now we would really, I mean, this doesn't really reflect the realities of stormwater. Because where you show that current pond's kind of the high side of the site. So we'd have to reconfigure some of this, but.
Do you know if I noted in your plans that there was a potential champion tree right here, which our sketch seeks to preserve? You haven't done an NRI on this yet, right?
We have. It's been approved.
You have.
It's approved.
Okay.
Yeah, that tree's there.
Is that the champion tree or no?
Yes.
Okay. So your current drawing would get rid of it with a parking lot.
Obviously, it would have to get modified.
Okay.
Well, and Kevin, this I think also makes the case for maybe moving the church a little bit further back and preserving that tree. And, between the church and the tree, that space could really become a wonderful place for the congregation to hold outdoor events and festivities and things of that nature.
No, I hear you. We'll certainly take it under advisement and take a look at it as we figure out how we're moving forward. Peter, was there any other issues about this sketch? As far as the future of the back parcel, currently that's just used as overflow parking when they have a festival out there, and there's no real design on what's going to happen back there at the moment.
Okay. And that's fine. I just want to note that this sketch also makes fire access to that parcel and future whatever much easier than your proposal does.
And we do appreciate the alternative design, and there's certainly room and time for us to consider it. One of the questions we had when we got it was whether this design, was circulated through the other agencies. It might help in our review to know whether or not, for example, State Highway or Fire and Rescue or DOT also had a chance to look at this design on top of the one we submitted.
I think the sketch came about just the middle of last week, so I don't think the other agencies had a chance to look at it.
We did discuss concepts, and I don't know if Marie's on the call. She can make comments as well.
I am here. Obviously, I haven't seen this yet. My only caution to you guys is to make sure that whatever access you provide to the existing buildings in the back is no worse than what you have in place today. So you need to look at your pavement widths and whatnot there. But this certainly doesn't appear to be something that can't work.
Yeah, it's just the fire access to the proposed church. If it has to be to the front door, it's probably more than 50 feet currently, the way it's shown. So
correct. You need to figure something out or make the ceremonial space accessible for apparatus would be the solution to that. And your turnaround, anybody know what the speed limit is out on the road in this area?
At least 35.
Yeah, okay. So if it's over 35, you cannot do a pull-in back out turnaround. So you need to use some chunk of the parking lot back there to make sure that we can get apparatus turned around. And again, depending on what your existing access looks like, you may need to make a full loop through that parking lot to get trucks all the way around to maintain access to the existing buildings.
Which I think was our thought from the very beginning.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. What other comments do we want to talk about, Peter? The archaeology?
Yeah, I guess we should talk about the archaeology. we saw the comment and we appreciate it. If I can try to interpret and you can tell me where I'm wrong, it sounds like there's a little bit of a concern that the known cemetery might stretch off of, I'll call it parcel B. That's what it used to be called. But it seems like the best research available is that if there are additional grave sites, those are to the east. Nonetheless, you'd like us to confirm that there's nothing to the west. Is that a pretty accurate summary?
Hello, this is Brian Crane with Historic Preservation. Yeah, that's basically it. We know from researching death certificates that there were far more people buried in this cemetery than there are markers. So we really don't know the limits of where people were actually interred. And some of the graves that are marked are actually very close to the property boundary with your property. So that's a concern.
Just out of curiosity, has either Montgomery County or any of the other nearby property owners, have they done any research that might help us get started on that?
Just historical research. So there's been a good bit of research into the historical deeds. So for example, nobody believes that Buddhism owns the existing cemetery. So as shown in the drawing that's on the screen now, that's likely incorrect. And there's been a lot of research into death certificates, but there hasn't been any archaeological research that would show where unmarked graves are located. We just don't know.
Okay.
So, I mean, what typically gets done in these cases is ground penetrating radar or other geophysical survey work. But ground penetrating radar seems to get the most consistently reliable results, and it would just be a matter of verifying that the graves from the cemetery don't cross the property line. Just having to understand that where people understood the property line 100 years ago may not be what we understand on the ground is where the line actually is.
Understood. Thank you. Kevin, anything else?
We talked about access, but whether if we use that access point that's on the sketch, whether State Highway would be requiring any sort of decel lanes in there. And obviously, there's discussion with Vision Zero about not having those, but I just would love to hear what the state's thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I would too. I noted that the state marked it with revisions requested on a concept plan, but there were no markups on the plan, Gracie. So I don't know what your revisions you would be requesting from the applicant or us. So if you could elaborate what SHA wants to see or doesn't want to see on this, I'd really appreciate it.
My concerns were the three, adding this new access with two ones already there in such a short distance.
So you'd rather them just reuse the existing driveway access that's there now? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, if possible.
So you're concerned about the separation between the proposed new driveway on their submitted plan and the existing one on the same property. Okay.
Right. This would have three driveways in very short, less than 300 feet.
Yeah, I think they're proposing to eliminate the one driveway on the I guess west side of this property.
Yeah.
Yes. What the plan shows a decel lane. What's where are you on that? You can guess where we are.
Yeah. I always prefer at least having a decel lane. It doesn't have to be too long, but it helps get traffic out of the through lanes. I don't know what the trips are. So there were 50 something parking spots, but it helps to, I know the speed limit is not that high, but it helps to get.
The speed, I was wrong. The speed is 40 miles per hour.
Okay, so that even warrants a decel lane, some form of a decel lane more.
Kwesi, I don't know if you saw the sketch that we had uploaded. In that sketch, we had actually eliminated, it was just one entry point, and it was at the bottom of the drawing, if you will. So it would, I think, the decel lane would not be needed in that case because you're really entering the property at the bottom end of the site. And it would certainly consolidate curb cuts into one location.
Right.
And there's a lot of driveway into the property in this sketch. So there will be a fair amount of spillage space on site as you turn in or you turn out. So it would help address some of the issues that if you turn right directly into the site, you're not into a parking lot immediately. You do have a few, at least 100+ feet of driveway that get some spillage into.
Yeah, I actually like this sketch.
Right. And the only reason was we don't own any of that right of way to the south, so we couldn't put a decel lane in there.
Yeah.
I will note that the county owns that property. South.
The piece to the south is county title parkland.
Okay.
And there'd be some concerns with the building on it. Is a historic Rosenwald School building.
Yeah.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions?
None from me.
And this is Kristen Austin with Transportation. I do want to note that the bicycle master plan recommends bikeable shoulders along the frontage. So that's something to keep in mind. That is a significant additional improvement.
Chris, this is Paul Mortensen. I might add that with bikeable shoulders, deceleration lanes make those bikeable shoulders even more dangerous by allowing faster speeding cars to go on the interior lanes of the street. So there's a conflict here between, deceleration lanes and trying to achieve Vision Zero that I think we all probably should talk about.
Yeah, and I know, Kwesi, we're not trying to put you on the spot, but what I'm hearing is that this drawing seems to lend more towards not requiring the XL decel lanes, correct? I know I'm not saying this is your final answer, and this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It definitely has more area for traffic too.
All right. Thanks, Kwesi. Do we need to move on? All right. Was there any applicant team? Do you have anything else? I hope you got some feedback that's helpful. Is there any other county agencies, DPS, Stormwater, Marie, or anyone else that needs to say anything?
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.